The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Fort Benton, Montana Territory, as Eliza Davis stumbled toward the only light still burning in the sleeping town. Her arms ached from carrying her 6-month-old daughter, Rose, bundled in what remained of their once fine blankets, now reduced to little more than tattered rags after weeks on the trail. The year was 1876, and Eliza had journeyed west with nothing but desperation and determination after her husband's death left her with no home, no money, and a baby to feed. The lantern light spilled from the doorway of Hawkins' General Store, the only establishment still open despite the late hour. Eliza paused outside, gathering what remained of her strength. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her that she had given the last of their food to Rose hours ago. The small bundle in her arms stirred, and Eliza adjusted the torn blanket to shield her daughter's face from the cool night air. "Just a little longer, sweet girl," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We'll find shelter tonight." She pushed open the door with her shoulder, the small bell above jingling to announce her arrival. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger with obvious irritation at the late-night interruption. "We're closing," he said flatly, his expression softening slightly when he noticed the baby. "What can I do for you, madam?" "Please, sir," Eliza said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "I've just arrived in town. Is there somewhere my daughter and I might find shelter for the night? I can work to pay for it come morning." The man's face grew stern. "The boarding house is full up with the cattle buyers in town. Hotels likely the same." He paused, looking her over with undisguised judgment. "You got any money at all?" Eliza swallowed hard. "Not much, sir." The storekeeper sighed heavily. "Fort Benton ain't a charity, miss. Times are hard for everyone." The bell above the door jingled again, and Eliza turned to see a tall figure filling the doorway. Broad-shouldered and trail-worn, the man stepped into the light, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind beneath the wide brim of a dusty hat. His eyes, a striking blue against his tanned skin, moved from the shopkeeper to Eliza and then to the bundle in her arms. "Evening, Hawkins," the man said, his voice deep and resonant. "Just need some coffee and tobacco before I head back to the ranch." "Samuel Donovan," the shopkeeper acknowledged with considerably more warmth than he had shown Eliza. "Didn't expect to see you in town this late. Thought you'd be headed back to the Diamond D by now." "Got delayed," Samuel replied simply, his eyes still on Eliza. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way she swayed slightly from exhaustion, and the threadbare blanket wrapped around her baby. The shopkeeper was already gathering the cowboy's requested items. "This young woman was just leaving," he said pointedly. "Can't help folks with no money, especially with a baby to feed." Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on the matter, Hawkins." He turned fully toward Eliza. "Madam, you look like you've traveled a fair piece." Eliza straightened her back, clinging to her remaining dignity. "Yes, sir, from Missouri." "That's quite a journey." He gestured to the bundle in her arms. "Your little one holding up all right?" Rose chose that moment to whimper, the sound small but distressed. Eliza tried to rock her, but her arms were trembling from fatigue and hunger. "She's just tired," Eliza said, though the worry in her voice betrayed her. "We both are." Samuel nodded, seeming to make a decision. He turned back to Hawkins, pulling out his wallet. "Add some milk and bread to my order, and whatever else the lady might need for her child." Eliza's eyes widened. "Sir, I couldn't possibly. It's just Samuel, madam, and it's no trouble." His voice was firm but kind. "The little one needs to eat, and so do you, from the looks of it." Hawkins grumbled but began gathering the additional items. Samuel turned back to Eliza. "You got a place to stay tonight?" She shook her head, shame coloring her cheeks. "No, but we'll manage." Samuel's gaze softened. He watched as the baby stirred again, a tiny hand escaping the tattered blanket. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his heavy wool coat and handed it to her. "Take this," he said. "It'll keep you both warmer than those torn blankets." Eliza hesitated, pride warring with necessity. "I can't accept." "You can and you will," Samuel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He looked down at the baby, whose eyes had opened to reveal irises as blue as a summer sky. "What's her name?" "Rose," Eliza answered softly. Samuel nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "She's a beautiful child." "Here's your order," Hawkins interrupted, placing a small bundle of supplies on the counter. Samuel paid without looking at the amount, then gathered the goods and nodded toward the door. "Come on," he said to Eliza. "I've got a wagon outside. I'll take you someplace safe for the night." Eliza hesitated, years of warnings about trusting strangers flashing through her mind. But there was something about this man, something solid and honest in his eyes, that made her believe he meant no harm. And with night falling and no other options, she had little choice. "Thank you," she said finally, following him out into the cooling evening air. Outside, a wagon stood waiting, hitched to two sturdy horses. Samuel placed the supplies in the back, then turned to help Eliza up onto the seat. As she settled, the baby still cradled in one arm, he climbed up beside her. "I've got a small cabin on the edge of my property," he explained, taking up the reins. "It's nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm. Used to be for the ranch hands, but it's empty now." Eliza studied his profile in the fading light. "Why are you helping us?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "My mother traveled west with me when I was just a boy, after my father died. I know what it's like to be on the road with nothing but hope." He glanced at Rose, who had settled back into sleep. "No child should sleep cold if there's someone around who can prevent it." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rolling steadily out of town. Eliza fought to keep her eyes open, exhaustion pulling at her like a physical weight. Samuel noticed and shifted slightly closer. "You can lean on my shoulder if you need to rest," he offered. "I'll make sure you don't fall." Gratitude washed over her, and too tired to refuse, Eliza allowed her head to rest against his solid frame. His warmth seeped through her threadbare dress, and for the first time in weeks she felt almost safe. "Her baby slept beneath torn blankets," Samuel murmured almost to himself. "But not anymore, not while I'm around." As the wagon rolled through the Montana night, Eliza's last conscious thought was that perhaps, just perhaps, their luck had finally changed. The first light of dawn was filtering through the small cabin window when Eliza awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. She was lying on a simple bed, still fully clothed, with Rose nestled beside her. A thick, warm quilt covered them both, and a small fire crackled in the stone hearth across the room. The events of the previous night came flooding back the kind cowboy who had brought them to this shelter, carrying her sleeping form from the wagon when exhaustion had finally claimed her completely. He must have tucked them in before leaving them to rest. Rose stirred beside her, and Eliza turned to see her daughter's eyes open, bright and alert in the morning light. For the first time in weeks, the baby's face wasn't pinched with discomfort, and Eliza felt a surge of gratitude toward the stranger who had provided this respite. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. "Madam, you awake in there?" Samuel's voice called from outside. "Yes," Eliza replied, quickly sitting up and smoothing her rumpled dress. "Please come in." The door swung open, and Samuel stepped inside, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. He had changed his clothes since the night before and appeared freshly shaven, though his sun-weathered features remained ruggedly handsome. "Brought you some breakfast," he said, setting the basket on the small table near the hearth. "Nothing fancy, just some biscuits, eggs, and bacon from the main house. Thought you might be hungry." As if on cue, Eliza's stomach growled loudly and a flush crept up her neck. Samuel pretended not to notice, busying himself with arranging the food on the table. "Thank you," she said, rising from the bed with Rose in her arms. "For everything. I don't know what would have become of us if you hadn't appeared last night." Samuel shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Eliza countered softly. "Most people in town were happy to look the other way." Something flickered in his eyes, anger perhaps, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Instead, he nodded toward Rose, who was watching him with curious eyes. "How's the little one this morning?" "Better," Eliza said, smiling down at her daughter. "She slept through the night for the first time in weeks." "Good." Samuel cleared his throat. "I brought some fresh milk for her, too." "It's in the jug there." Eliza moved to the table, settling Rose on her hip as she surveyed the generous breakfast. "This is too much." "It's not," Samuel interrupted firmly. "You both need your strength." He gestured to a rocking chair near the fire. "There's clean water in the basin if you want to freshen up. I'll leave you to your breakfast." As he turned to go, Eliza called out, "Mr. Donovan." He paused at the door. "Just Samuel, please." "Samuel," she amended. I mean I can't stay here indefinitely. I need to find work, a way to support Rose." He studied her for a moment. "What kind of work were you looking for?" Eliza lifted her chin. "Anything honest. I can cook, clean, so. I worked as a school teacher back in Missouri before." She trailed off, unwilling to delve into painful memories. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "As it happens, I could use some help around the ranch house. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister in Helena." He hesitated. "It's not much, but the position comes with room and board and a small wage. You and Rose could stay in the main house." Hope blossomed in Eliza's chest, so sudden and bright it almost hurt. "Are you serious?" "I don't make offers I don't mean," he replied simply. "It won't be easy work, mind you. The Diamond D is a working cattle ranch, and there's always something that needs doing." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Eliza said quickly, "and I'd be grateful for the opportunity." Samuel nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good, finish your breakfast and get settled. I'll come back midday to take you up to the main house." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Mrs. Davis, Eliza, please." A smile touched his lips. "Eliza, whatever brought you and Rose to Fort Benton, whatever you're running from or toward, it doesn't matter here. The Diamond D can be a fresh start if that's what you're looking for." With that, he departed, leaving Eliza staring after him, wondering how this stern-faced cowboy had seen so clearly into her heart. She looked down at Rose, who was reaching for a biscuit on the table. "Well, little one," she whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "It seems our luck has changed after all." After breakfast, Eliza took stock of their meager possessions. Everything they owned fit into a single carpet bag, most of it baby things for Rose. Her own clothing was limited to 2 worn dresses besides the one she wore, a shawl, and a pair of badly scuffed boots. Their journey west had forced her to sell or leave behind nearly everything else. She washed herself and rose with the clean water Samuel had provided, grateful for the chance to remove the dust of travel from their skin. By the time she heard hoofbeats approaching outside, both were as presentable as their circumstances allowed. Samuel appeared at the door, this time leading a sturdy brown mare. "Thought you might prefer to ride rather than take the wagon," he explained. "It's not far to the main house, but with the little one." "Thank you," Eliza said, gathering Rose and her carpet bag. She approached the horse somewhat hesitantly. I haven't ridden much since I was a girl. Daisy here is gentle as they come, Samuel assured her, patting the mare's neck. He set the carpet bag behind the saddle, then reached for Rose. May I hold her while you mount up? Eliza hesitated only briefly before handing her daughter to him. Samuel cradled Rose with surprising tenderness for such large, work-roughened hands. The baby stared up at him with wide eyes, then reached out to grasp at his shirt collar. She's not usually so comfortable with strangers, Eliza observed as she mounted the horse with Samuel's free hand steadying her. Animals and babies, Samuel said, carefully passing Rose back up to her mother. They tend to know who they can trust. There was no boast in his words, just a simple statement of fact. He took the mare's reins and began leading them along a well-worn trail that wound through a meadow dotted with wildflowers. As they crested a small rise, Eliza caught her breath at the view that opened before them. The Diamond D Ranch spread across a valley, green and fertile in the late spring sunshine. A large two-story house built of sturdy timber stood at the center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. In the distance, a herd of cattle grazed peacefully, tended by mounted cowboys whose occasional whoops carried on the breeze. It's beautiful, Eliza breathed. Been in my family for 20 years, Samuel said, pride evident in his voice. My father claimed this land when he came west. Built it up from nothing. His expression clouded slightly. He died when I was 15. My mother and I kept it going after that. And your mother? Eliza asked gently. Passed on 3 winters ago, Samuel replied, his tone matter of fact though Eliza detected the underlying grief. Pneumonia took her. I'm sorry, she said sincerely. Samuel nodded his acknowledgement but didn't dwell on the subject. Ranch has been doing well. We run about 2,000 head of cattle now, employ 15 men year-round, more during the big drives. As they approached the house, Eliza could see that it was larger and more impressive than it had first appeared. Though not ostentatious, it spoke of solid prosperity. A wide porch wrapped around the front, furnished with rocking chairs that looked wonderfully inviting. It's just me in the main house now, Samuel explained as he helped Eliza dismount, then took Rose while she found her footing. The hands bunk in the bunkhouse over yonder, except for my foreman, Hank, who has a small cabin of his own. He handed Rose back to Eliza and led them up the porch steps. Your duties would mainly be cooking, cleaning, and keeping the house in order. Nothing too strenuous, but it keeps me from having to do it, which is a blessing for everyone involved. A self-deprecating smile briefly lightened his features. Inside, the house was surprisingly welcoming. Though masculine in its furnishings, all dark woods and practical fabrics, it was clean and well-maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated the sitting room, flanked by comfortable-looking chairs. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that piqued Eliza's interest immediately. You have a lovely home, she said sincerely. Thank you. Samuel led her through to a spacious kitchen at the back of the house, where a large wood-burning stove gleamed with polish. This would be your domain primarily. 3 meals a day for me. Sometimes Hank joins when we're discussing ranch business. He showed her the pantry, stocked with staples, and the cold cellar accessed through a trapdoor in the floor. We butcher our own meat, and there's a kitchen garden out back with vegetables. Anything else you need, just let me know and I'll get it from town on my next trip. Upstairs, he showed her to a comfortable bedroom with an adjoining smaller room. Thought this might work for you and Rose, he explained. The smaller room was meant to be a nursery when. He stopped, then continued more carefully. When my parents thought they might have more children. Never happened, but it's perfect for a little one now. Eliza entered the smaller room and found it already prepared with a small bed suitable for a baby, complete with fresh linens. A rocking chair sat in the corner near a window that overlooked the mountains in the distance. "You did all this since last night?" she asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "Had some of the hands bring up the furniture from storage. It's been in the family a while." Eliza felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly to dispel them. "Thank you. This is more than I could have hoped for." "It's nothing," he insisted, clearly uncomfortable with her emotion. "My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything. I'll leave you to get settled in. Supper's usually at 6, but take your time today. Rest if you need it." With that, he left her alone with Rose in their new accommodations. Eliza sat in the rocking chair, her daughter content in her arms, and allowed herself a moment to absorb the incredible turn of events. Yesterday, they had been homeless, hungry, and without prospects. Today, they had shelter, food, and employment. She looked down at Rose, who was happily gumming her own fingers. "We're going to be all right," she whispered. "I don't know why that man has been so kind to us, but I'm grateful for it." Rose gurgled in response, her innocence and trust a powerful reminder of why Eliza had made the difficult journey west in the first place. For a chance at a new beginning, away from painful memories and the scandal that had threatened to define them both. Here, in this quiet room overlooking the Montana wilderness, perhaps they had found it at last. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that gave Eliza a sense of stability she hadn't felt since before her husband's death. Rising early, she prepared breakfast for Samuel before he headed out to work with his men. The mornings were spent cleaning and maintaining the house while Rose napped or played in a small pen Samuel had fashioned for her in the kitchen. Afternoons often found her in the garden, tending to vegetables with Rose nestled in a sling across her chest. Samuel usually returned to the house for the midday meal, sometimes accompanied by Hank Miller, his foreman, a grizzled, taciturn man in his 50s who nonetheless had a surprising soft spot for Rose. At first, these meals were consumed in awkward silence, but gradually, conversation began to flow more easily between them. Eliza learned that Samuel had run the Diamond D alone since his mother's death, expanding its operations and earning a reputation as one of the most successful ranchers in the territory. He was respected by his men for his fair treatment and willingness to work alongside them when needed. In turn, Samuel discovered that Eliza had been widowed for nearly a year. Her husband, Thomas Davis, had been a bank clerk in St. Joseph, Missouri, who died suddenly of a heart ailment, leaving his young wife pregnant and with few resources. What Eliza didn't reveal was how Thomas's family had turned against her after his death, accusing her of marrying their son for money, and suggesting that Rose might not even be his child, a cruel falsehood that had driven her to seek a new life far from their influence. One evening in late June, after Rose had been put to bed, Eliza found Samuel on the front porch, smoking a pipe and gazing out at the sunset. Hesitantly, she joined him, settling into the rocking chair beside his. "Beautiful evening," she remarked, drawing her shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. Samuel nodded, offering a rare smile. "One of the things I love most about this country. The sky seems bigger somehow." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the rocking chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. "You've been good for this place," Samuel said finally, surprising her. "The house hasn't felt this much like a home since my mother was alive." Eliza felt a flush of pleasure at his words. "I've always believed that a home should be more than just shelter. It should be a haven." Samuel studied her in the fading light. "Rose is thriving too. She seems happier every day." "She is," Eliza agreed, smiling at the thought of her daughter's increasingly sunny disposition. Children are remarkably resilient, and having stability regular meals. It makes all the difference. You never speak of her father, Samuel observed quietly. It wasn't quite a question, but the curiosity was evident. Eliza's hand stilled in her lap. Thomas was a good man, she said carefully. Kind, responsible, he would have been a loving father. She swallowed hard. But he never got the chance to meet her. Samuel nodded, respecting her evident grief. I'm sorry. Thank you. Eliza hesitated, then asked, Have you never married, Samuel? A successful rancher like yourself must have had opportunities. A shadow crossed his face. Once I nearly did. Her name was Catherine. She was the daughter of a businessman from Helena who was looking to invest in cattle. His mouth twisted slightly. Turned out she wasn't as interested in becoming a rancher's wife as she was in convincing me to sell the Diamond D and move east. I take it you declined both proposals, Eliza said. This land is in my blood, Samuel replied simply. I couldn't abandon it any more than I could cut off my own arm. He tapped his pipe against the porch railing. After that, I decided it was simpler to focus on the ranch. The right woman would have to understand what this place means to me. Eliza nodded, understanding completely. A home isn't just walls and a roof. It's the memories, the history, the sense of belonging. Samuel looked at her with new appreciation in his eyes. Exactly. Their conversation was interrupted by a cry from upstairs, Rose awakening from her slumber. Eliza rose immediately, but Samuel stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. Would you mind if I came with you? I brought something for her earlier, but didn't want to disturb her sleep. Curious, Eliza nodded, and they went upstairs together to the nursery where Rose was standing in her crib, tears streaking her cheeks but subsiding at the sight of her mother. Hello, sweet girl, Eliza cooed, lifting her daughter into her arms. What's all this fuss about? Samuel reached into his pocket and produced a small carved wooden horse, its details simple but lovingly rendered. Made this during my lunch break today, he explained, suddenly seeming almost shy. Thought she might like something to play with. Eliza was touched by the gesture. Samuel, that's so thoughtful. Look, Rose, see what Mr. Donovan made for you. Rose reached for the wooden toy with eager hands, immediately bringing it to her mouth. Samuel chuckled. I made sure to sand it smooth, figured it might end up exactly there. Watching her daughter happily gumming the toy, Eliza felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the mild summer evening. Samuel Donovan was proving to be far more than just a generous employer. He was becoming something she hadn't dared hope for a friend. Later that night, as Eliza lay in bed listening to Rose's soft breathing from the adjoining room, she acknowledged to herself that her feelings for Samuel were growing more complicated by the day. His kindness, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, all were becoming dear to her in ways that both excited and frightened her. It was too soon after Thomas, she told herself firmly. Too soon and too risky. Samuel had offered them sanctuary and employment, not courtship. To mistake his generosity for romantic interest would jeopardize everything she had worked to build for herself and Rose. Still, as sleep claimed her, Eliza couldn't help but imagine what it might be like to belong at the Diamond D, not just as an employee, but as something more permanent. To make a true home here with Samuel. The dream was both sweet and dangerous, and Eliza resolved to guard her heart more carefully in the days ahead. July brought scorching heat to the Montana territory, and with it, the busiest time of the ranching year. Samuel and his men worked from before dawn until well after dusk, moving cattle to higher pastures, mending fences, and preparing for the fall drive to the railhead in Helena. Eliza rarely saw Samuel except at mealtimes, and even then, he was often distracted, his mind clearly on ranch business. She tried not to feel disappointed by his absence, reminding herself that their relationship was professional, not personal. Still, she found herself watching for him from the kitchen window, her heart quickening when she caught sight of his tall figure riding across the pasture. One particularly hot afternoon, while Rose napped upstairs with the windows open to catch any breeze, Eliza was kneading dough for the evening bread when she heard a commotion in the yard. Looking out, she saw several ranch hands helping Samuel down from his horse. Even from a distance, she could tell something was wrong. He was hunched over, his face contorted in pain. Without hesitation, Eliza wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron and hurried outside into the blazing sun. "What happened?" she called as she approached the group of men. Hank turned to her, his weathered face creased with concern. "Boss got thrown while checking the north fence line. Horse spooked at a rattlesnake, landed hard on his shoulder." Samuel looked up, his face pale beneath his tan. "It's nothing serious," he insisted, though the tight set of his jaw suggested otherwise. "Just wrenched it a bit. Sounded like more than a wrench when it happened," Hank countered dryly. "Never heard the boss swear like that before." Despite his obvious pain, Samuel managed a weak glare at his foreman. "Thank you for that commentary, Hank." Eliza stepped forward decisively. "Bring him inside," she directed, carefully. The men helped Samuel into the house and settled him in one of the chairs in the sitting room. Eliza quickly assessed the situation, noting how he cradled his right arm against his chest. "I need to examine your shoulder," she told him firmly. "Your shirt will have to come off." Samuel's eyebrows rose, but before he could object, Hank spoke up. "You heard the lady, boss." "I'll send one of the boys for Doc Weber, but he's likely over at the Harrison place delivering their newest. Could be hours." With a resigned nod, Samuel agreed. "Fine, but the rest of you get back to work. That fence still needs fixing." The men filed out, leaving Eliza alone with Samuel. She helped him remove his shirt, trying to be as gentle as possible while maintaining a professional demeanor. It wasn't easy. Despite her best intentions, she couldn't help noticing the broad expanse of his chest, muscled from years of physical labor, now glistening slightly with sweat from the heat and exertion. Forcing herself to focus, Eliza examined his shoulder, which was already swelling and discoloring with the beginnings of an impressive bruise. Samuel winced when her fingers probed the joint. "I don't think it's broken," she said after a careful assessment. "But it's a bad sprain, possibly worse. You'll need to rest it for several days." Samuel shook his head immediately. "Can't. Too much to do before the drive." "You won't be much use to anyone if you cause permanent damage," Eliza countered, her tone brooking no argument. "At the very least, you need to immobilize it tonight and see what the doctor says when he arrives." Samuel looked like he wanted to protest further, but seemed to think better of it when he tried to move his arm and was rewarded with a fresh wave of pain. "Fine," he conceded grudgingly. "One night." Eliza nodded, satisfied with the small victory. "I'll make a sling and prepare a poultice to help with the swelling, and you'll need something for the pain." She hesitated, then added with a small smile, "I promise not to tell your men that you're following a woman's orders." That earned her a reluctant chuckle from Samuel. "They probably already know. Hank's been saying for weeks that you're the real authority around here now." Eliza busied herself gathering the necessary supplies to hide the flush that rose to her cheeks at his words. She returned with clean bandages, a jar of salve made from herbs from her garden, and a bottle of whiskey. "Medicinal purposes only," she said, pouring a measure into a glass and handing it to him. Samuel accepted it gratefully, downing the liquor in one swallow. "Thank you." As Eliza worked on preparing the poultice, a cry from upstairs announced that Rose had awakened from her nap. Samuel noticed her momentary hesitation. "Go get her," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Eliza hurried upstairs to fetch her daughter, returning to find Samuel exactly where she'd left him, though his features had relaxed somewhat, either from the whiskey or simply from having a moment to catch his breath. Rose, now fully awake and curious, squirmed in Eliza's arms, reaching toward Samuel with chubby hands. "She wants to say hello," Eliza explained, bringing her daughter closer. Samuel smiled, the pain in his eyes temporarily eclipsed by genuine pleasure. "Hello there, little miss," he said softly. "Sorry I can't hold you today. Had a bit of an argument with a horse and the horse won." Rose babbled something in response, patting his uninjured shoulder with her small hand. The simple, innocent gesture seemed to affect Samuel deeply. He glanced up at Eliza, an unreadable emotion in his eyes. "She's something special, your girl," he said quietly. "Yes, she is," Eliza agreed, her throat suddenly tight. She settled Rose on a blanket on the floor with some toys, including the wooden horse Samuel had carved, then returned to the task of treating his injury. As she applied the poultice and carefully wrapped his shoulder, Eliza was acutely aware of Samuel's gaze on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her hands tremble slightly. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with unspoken feelings. "You have gentle hands," Samuel observed softly. Eliza focused on securing the bandage, not trusting herself to meet his eyes. "My father was a doctor," she explained. "I used to assist him sometimes." "Is that right?" Samuel seemed genuinely interested. "You've never mentioned your parents before." "They both died when I was 20, Eliza said, the old grief a dull ache now rather than the sharp pain it had once been. "Influenza took them within days of each other." "I'm sorry," Samuel said, his good hand briefly covering hers where it rested on his shoulder. "That's a hard thing to bear." His touch, warm and calloused, sent a jolt of awareness through her that had nothing to do with sympathy. Eliza withdrew her hand, moving to prepare the sling. "It was a long time ago," she said, striving for a neutral tone. "We should get this sling on you and get you settled. You need rest." Samuel allowed her to arrange his arm in the sling without protest, though he grimaced as the movement jostled his injured shoulder. When she was finished, he caught her wrist gently. "Thank you, Eliza," he said, his blue eyes serious. "Not just for this, but for bringing life back into this house." The sincerity in his voice undid her careful composure. "Samuel," whatever she might have said was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Weber, a portly, white-haired man who burst into the room with more energy than his appearance suggested. "Heard we had an injured rancher," he announced cheerfully. "Let's have a look at you, Donovan." The moment between Eliza and Samuel shattered like glass. She stepped back, gathering Rose from the floor, and excused herself to prepare dinner while the doctor examined Samuel's shoulder. Later, after the doctor had confirmed her assessment a severe sprain that would require at least a week of rest, and after she had served a simple dinner that Samuel barely touched due to the pain, Eliza helped him upstairs to his bedroom. It was the first time she had entered his personal space, and she was struck by how it reflected the man himself. Straightforward, unadorned, yet with unexpected touches that revealed deeper aspects of his character. Books stacked by the bedside, a fine saddle carefully maintained on a stand in the corner, a small framed sketch of the ranch house that she guessed might have been drawn by his mother. "I can manage from here," Samuel insisted as they reached the doorway, obviously uncomfortable with the role reversal that had him receiving care rather than providing it. "Are you sure?" Eliza asked, Concerned by the pallor that had returned to his face as the effects of the pain medication began to wear off, Samuel nodded, his jaw set stubbornly. "I've had worse." Eliza doubted that was true but respected his pride enough not to argue. "Very well. There's water and more medicine on your nightstand if you need it during the night. Don't hesitate to call if the pain worsens." Samuel's expression softened. "I'll be fine, Eliza. Thank you for your care today." "It's what anyone would do," she said, deliberately echoing his words from their first meeting. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not anyone," he countered quietly. Their gazes held for a long moment, and Eliza felt that same charge in the air between them. Then Rose, balanced on her hip, let out a dramatic yawn, breaking the spell. "Good night, Samuel," Eliza said softly, turning to go. "Good night, Eliza," he replied, his voice following her down the hallway like a caress. In her own room, after settling Rose for the night, Eliza stood by the window looking out at the star-filled sky. The vastness of it reminded her of how small her old life had been, constrained by convention and expectation. Here, under this enormous Montana sky, she felt as though she could breathe fully for the first time. And if her thoughts kept returning to the way Samuel had looked at her, to the warmth of his hand on hers, to the sense of rightness she felt in caring for him well, perhaps that was just another kind of freedom, one she hadn't dared to imagine until now. Samuel's injury forced him to remain close to the house for the next several days, a restriction he bore with poor grace, despite Eliza's attempts to make him comfortable. Used to constant activity, he chafed at the enforced idleness, pacing the house like a caged wolf when he wasn't sitting on the porch issuing instructions to Hank and the other hands. His presence changed the rhythm of Eliza's days. Rather than working alone while Rose played nearby, she found herself preparing meals with Samuel seated at the kitchen table, offering unsolicited advice on how his mother used to make certain dishes. Instead of quiet evenings spent reading or sewing after Rose was asleep, she now sat with Samuel in the sitting room, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes engaged in conversations that ranged from books they had read to their hopes for the future. On the third evening of his convalescence, a thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains, bringing welcome relief from the heat, but sending Rose into a panic at the first crack of thunder. Nothing Eliza did seemed to soothe her daughter, who wailed in terror at each rumble and flash of lightning. "May I try?" Samuel asked, appearing in the doorway of the nursery where Eliza was attempting to rock her distraught daughter. Eliza nodded, too tired and frustrated to refuse. Carefully, mindful of his injured shoulder, Samuel took Rose in his good arm. To Eliza's astonishment, the baby's cries immediately began to subside as Samuel walked slowly around the room, speaking to her in a low, steady voice. "It's just the sky talking, little one," he murmured. "Nothing to fear. Thunder is just the clouds bumping into each other, saying hello." Rose hiccuped, her sobs quieting as she stared up at Samuel with wide, trusting eyes. When the next thunderclap sounded, she startled but didn't cry, looking to Samuel's face instead. "That's right," he encouraged. "Just a noise, can't hurt you, not while I'm here." Eliza watched, amazed as her daughter gradually relaxed in Samuel's arms, her small head eventually resting against his chest as her eyelids grew heavy. Within minutes, Rose was asleep, her previous terror forgotten. "How did you do that?" Eliza whispered as Samuel gently transferred the sleeping baby to her crib. He shrugged his good shoulder, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "My mother was afraid of storms. Father used to say the same things to her. Somehow it always seemed to help." Eliza's heart squeezed at the image of a younger Samuel, learning how to comfort and protect from his father's example. "You would have made a wonderful father," she said softly. The words hung in the air between them, too intimate, too revealing. Eliza immediately wished she could take them back, afraid she had crossed some invisible boundary, but Samuel didn't seem offended. Instead, he looked down at Rose's peaceful form, his expression thoughtful. "Never gave it much thought before," he admitted. "The ranch was always enough." He glanced up, meeting Eliza's eyes. "But lately I've been wondering if maybe it doesn't have to be everything." The implication in his words, in his gaze, made Eliza's breath catch. Before she could respond, another crack of thunder shook the house, causing the lamps to flicker. Rose stirred but didn't wake, soothed by whatever magic Samuel had worked. "We should let her sleep," Eliza whispered, moving toward the door. Samuel followed, closing the nursery door softly behind them. In the hallway, lit only by a single lamp against the storm's darkness, they stood facing each other, closer than propriety might allow. "Eliza," Samuel began, his voice low and serious. "There's something I've been wanting to—" A sudden pounding on the front door downstairs interrupted him, followed by Hank's voice calling urgently. "Boss, you better come quick. Lightning hit the barn." The moment shattered, Samuel's expression immediately shifting from personal to professional concern. "Stay here with Rose," he instructed, already moving toward the stairs. "I'll handle this." "Your shoulder," Eliza protested, but he was already gone, taking the stairs two at a time despite his injury. Through the window, Eliza could see flames licking at one corner of the large barn. Ranch hands were already forming a bucket brigade from the well, but the fire, fed by dry timber and hay, was spreading quickly. Fear clutched at her heart as she watched Samuel dash into the downpour, immediately taking charge despite his injury. The cattle and horses housed in the barn were being led to safety, but the structure itself might be lost if the rain didn't help quell the flames soon. For hours, Eliza watched anxiously from the window as Samuel and his men battled the fire. Rose slept through it all, oblivious to the drama unfolding outside. Finally, near midnight, the rain and the ranch hands' efforts prevailed, leaving the barn damaged but largely intact. When Samuel finally returned to the house, he was soaked to the skin, covered in soot and clearly exhausted. His sling was gone, and he held his injured arm stiffly at his side, suggesting he had used it despite the doctor's orders. "The animals?" Eliza asked immediately, hurrying to help him remove his sodden coat. "All safe," Samuel confirmed, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm and fire. "Lost part of the hayloft and some of the eastern wall, but it could have been much worse." "You're freezing," Eliza observed, noticing how his body shivered beneath her hands. "You need to get out of these wet clothes and warm up immediately." Too tired to argue, Samuel allowed her to guide him upstairs to his room, where she helped him remove his boots and left him to change while she went to prepare hot tea and fetch dry bandages for his shoulder, which had begun to bleed where he had torn the stitches the doctor had placed. When she returned, Samuel was sitting on the edge of his bed in dry trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, his wet hair slicked back from his forehead, making him look younger somehow, more vulnerable. "Let me see your shoulder," Eliza said, setting down the tea tray. Samuel didn't protest as she gently peeled back the sodden bandage to reveal the angry red wound beneath. "You've torn your stitches," she scolded, though there was no real heat in her words. "What were you thinking, using this arm to fight a fire?" "Wasn't thinking," Samuel admitted, wincing as she cleaned the wound. "Just reacting. The barn is a building," Eliza interrupted firmly. "It can be rebuilt. You could have done permanent damage to yourself." Samuel's mouth curved in a tired smile. "Didn't know you cared so much, Mrs. Davis." Eliza's hand stilled on his shoulder. "Of course I care," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes as she resumed her task. "You've been so kind to Rose and me, I would hate to see you hurt." Samuel caught her wrist gently, forcing her to look at him. "Is that the only reason?" The directness of his question, the intensity in his blue eyes, made evasion impossible. Eliza swallowed hard, knowing they were approaching a precipice from which there would be no turning back. "No," she whispered. "That's not the only reason." Samuel's gaze softened, his thumb tracing small circles on the inside of her wrist, sending shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with the storm still raging outside. "Before we were interrupted earlier," he said slowly, "I was about to tell you something important." He took a deep breath. "When you and Rose first arrived, I thought I was just offering shelter to someone in need. But these past weeks, having you here, seeing you with Rose, watching you make this house a home again." He shook his head, seeming to struggle for words. "Samuel," Eliza breathed, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "I'm not a man who finds words easily," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "But I need you to know that you've become important to me, Eliza. You and Rose both. More important than I ever expected." Eliza felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she had been trying so hard to suppress. "We feel the same," she admitted. "Being here with you, it's come to feel like home." Samuel's hand moved from her wrist to cup her cheek. "It could be," he said softly. "Your home. Permanently. If that's something you might want." The implication was clear, though he hadn't spoken the actual words. Eliza leaned slightly into his touch, allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing between them. "I think," she said carefully, "that could be something I might want very much." Samuel's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his tired face with joy. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. "May I kiss you, Eliza?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In answer, she closed the small distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepening as Samuel's good arm circled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Samuel rested his cheek against her hair. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. Eliza laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in years. "So have I," she admitted. "But I was afraid I was imagining the way you looked at me sometimes." "You weren't imagining anything," Samuel assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I tried to be professional, knowing you were still grieving your husband." At the mention of Thomas, a small shadow crossed Eliza's heart. "I did love him," she said honestly, "but what I feel for you, it's different, stronger somehow." She looked up at Samuel, needing him to understand. "Is that terrible of me?" "No," Samuel said firmly. "It just means you have a heart big enough to love twice in a lifetime. That's a gift, Eliza, not something to feel guilty about." His understanding, his acceptance of her past without jealousy or judgment, only confirmed what Eliza already knew, that this quiet, steadfast man was someone she could build a future with, someone who would love not only her but her daughter as his own. "It's late," she said reluctantly, aware that he was exhausted and injured. "You need to rest. We can talk more in the morning." Samuel nodded, though he seemed reluctant to let her go. "In the morning," he agreed, stealing one more kiss before releasing her. As Eliza left his room and walked down the hallway to check on Rose, her heart felt too full to contain. Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, the thunder now distant rumbles rather than threatening crashes. Inside, A different kind of storm had passed the uncertainty and hesitation that had kept her and Samuel apart, leaving in its wake a sense of clarity and possibility that made the future seem suddenly bright with promise. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, the storm having washed everything clean. Eliza awoke early, her heart light despite the few hours of sleep she'd managed. Rose was still slumbering peacefully in her crib, apparently having decided that thunderstorms weren't so frightening after all. Moving quietly so as not to wake her daughter, Eliza dressed with particular care, selecting her best dress, a simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up neatly, allowing a few soft curls to frame her face, and even dabbed a touch of rose water behind her ears, a small luxury she rarely indulged in. Downstairs, she found the kitchen empty but not silent. Through the open window, she could hear men's voices, Samuel and Hank, discussing repairs to the barn. Samuel's tone was authoritative but calm, showing no trace of the exhaustion or pain he must still be feeling. Smiling to herself, Eliza began preparing breakfast, humming softly as she worked. The events of the previous night had changed everything, opening a door to possibilities she had scarcely allowed herself to imagine. She was just taking biscuits from the oven when Samuel entered the kitchen, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes, his arm back in its sling. He paused in the doorway, his eyes warming as they took in the sight of her. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a new intimacy that sent a pleasant shiver down Eliza's spine. "Good morning," she replied, suddenly shy despite the kiss they had shared. "How's your shoulder?" "Sore," Samuel admitted, crossing to where she stood, "but worth it." Without hesitation, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. "I was afraid I might have dreamed last night." Eliza smiled up at him, her initial shyness melting away. "Not a dream." They stood there for a moment, simply looking at each other with new awareness, until the sound of boiling coffee breaking its seal reminded Eliza of breakfast. "You should sit," she instructed, gesturing to the table. "Doctor's orders, remember." Samuel complied with a good-natured grumble, settling into his usual chair. "Hank and the boys have already started on the barn repairs," he reported as Eliza served him coffee. "Damage isn't as bad as it looked last night. We were lucky." "Very lucky," Eliza agreed, thinking not just of the barn but of everything that had led her to this place, this moment. "Samuel, about last night, what you said about wanting Rose and me to stay permanently." "I meant every word," Samuel said immediately, his expression serious. "I know it might seem sudden, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached for her hand across the table. "I love you, Eliza, and Rose too. I want to build a life with both of you if you'll have me." The simple declaration, spoken without flourish but with absolute sincerity, moved Eliza deeply. "We would be honored," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "Though there are things about me, about my past, that you should know before, whatever it is," Samuel interrupted gently. "It doesn't matter. We all have parts of our past we'd rather leave behind. What matters is who you are now and what we can be together." Before Eliza could respond, a cry from upstairs announced Rose's awakening. "I should get her," she said, reluctantly releasing Samuel's hand. "Bring her down for breakfast," Samuel suggested. "I'd like to spend some time with both my girls today." "My girls." The simple phrase filled Eliza with a happiness so profound it almost hurt. She hurried upstairs to fetch Rose, finding her daughter standing in her crib, her face breaking into a delighted smile at the sight of her mother. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eliza cooed, lifting Rose into her arms. "Someone special is waiting to see you downstairs." When they entered the kitchen, Samuel's face lit up at the sight of Rose, who immediately reached for him with eager hands. Without hesitation, He took her in his good arm, settling her on his knee. "There's my brave girl," he said, smiling as Rose patted his face with her small hands. "Did you sleep well after all that thunder?" Rose babbled happily in response, clearly comfortable with him in a way that touched Eliza deeply. Watching them together, Samuel's large hand steadying Rose's back, her daughter's complete trust in him, Eliza felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. This was family. Over the next few days, a new pattern emerged in the household. Though Samuel was still restricted in his activities due to his shoulder, he made a point of spending more time with Eliza and Rose. He would sit in the kitchen while Eliza cooked, telling stories of his childhood on the ranch, or join them in the garden in the cool of the evening, watching as Rose practiced her newfound crawling skills on a blanket spread over the grass. In the evenings, after Rose was asleep, they would sit together on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying each other's presence as the stars appeared overhead. Samuel spoke of his plans for the ranch, how he hoped to expand their breeding program and perhaps build a proper schoolhouse for the children of his workers. Eliza shared her dreams of perhaps one day teaching again, once Rose was older. They didn't rush toward formal declarations or immediate changes. There was an unspoken agreement between them that they had time to learn each other, to build a foundation strong enough to support the future they both envisioned. A week after the storm, Eliza was hanging laundry in the yard when she spotted a wagon approaching down the long drive to the ranch house. Shielding her eyes against the sun, she recognized Dr. Weber's buggy, presumably coming to check on Samuel's shoulder. She hurried inside to inform Samuel, who was in his study reviewing cattle tallies. "Dr. Weber is on his way up the drive," she announced. "Shall I prepare some refreshments?" Samuel nodded, setting aside his papers. "That would be kind. Though I suspect he's just coming to scold me for using my arm during the fire." Eliza smiled, knowing he was probably right. "I'll support him in that. You were entirely too reckless." Samuel caught her hand as she turned to go, pulling her gently toward him. "Worth it to save the barn," he insisted, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And besides, if I hadn't been injured in the first place, who knows how long it would have taken me to find the courage to tell you how I felt." "Is that so?" Eliza teased, allowing herself to be drawn closer. "And here I thought Samuel Donovan wasn't afraid of anything." "Only losing what matters most," Samuel replied, his tone shifting from playful to sincere as he looked up at her. "And that's you and Rose now, Eliza. You should know that." Touched by his words, Eliza leaned down to kiss him softly. "We're not going anywhere," she promised. The sound of a throat clearing from the doorway startled them apart. Dr. Weber stood there, his expression a mixture of surprise and amusement. "I see my patient is recovering quite well," he observed dryly. Eliza felt her cheeks flame as she straightened, smoothing her skirts. "Dr. Weber, I was just telling Mr. Donovan that you had arrived." "Indeed," the doctor replied, not bothering to hide his smile. "Well, don't let me interrupt. I can come back another time." "No need for that," Samuel said firmly, though Eliza noticed his ears had reddened slightly. "I appreciate you coming all this way to check on me." As the doctor examined Samuel's shoulder, declaring it to be healing well despite his foolish exertions during the fire, Eliza busied herself preparing coffee and the fresh apple cake she had baked that morning. By the time she returned with the tray, the medical portion of the visit was concluded, and the men were discussing the fire damage. "Seems like you were fortunate all around," Dr. Weber was saying as he accepted a cup of coffee from Eliza. "No serious injuries, limited damage to the barn." He glanced between Eliza and Samuel with knowing eyes, and perhaps some unexpected blessings as well. Samuel met Eliza's gaze over the rim of his coffee cup, a small smile playing at his lips. "Yes," he agreed softly. "Unexpected blessings indeed." After the doctor departed, with a parting admonishment for Samuel to continue resting his shoulder, Eliza began clearing away the coffee cups. Samuel watched her for a moment, then said quietly, "He wasn't wrong, you know." Eliza looked up questioningly. "About the unexpected blessings," Samuel clarified. "When I saw you that first night in Hawkins' store, with Rose in your arms and determination in your eyes despite being dead on your feet, I never imagined how much you would come to mean to me." Eliza set down the cups, moved by his words. "I never imagined any of this either," she admitted. "When Thomas died, I thought my chance at happiness had ended. Coming west was about survival, nothing more." She smiled softly. "But then you offered your blanket to keep Rose warm, and somehow that simple act of kindness became the beginning of everything." Samuel rose from his chair, crossing to where she stood. With gentle hands, he drew her into his arms, mindful of his healing shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious. "I don't want to rush you, Eliza. I know you've been through a great deal and that trust comes hard after loss. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'd be honored to make our arrangement more permanent." Eliza's heart quickened at his meaning. "Are you proposing, Samuel Donovan?" "Not yet," he replied with a small smile. "When I do, I'll do it properly with a ring and on one knee as you deserve. But I wanted you to know my intentions are serious and honorable." "I never doubted that for a moment," Eliza assured him, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "And when you do ask properly, my answer will be yes." Samuel's arms tightened around her, and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. In that moment, surrounded by his strength and warmth, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just shelter but a true home for herself and for Rose. August brought relentless heat to the Montana territory, the kind that shimmered above the distant hills and sent ranch hands seeking shade during the midday hours. But it also brought a flurry of activity to the Diamond D as preparations for the fall cattle drive intensified. Samuel's shoulder had healed enough for him to resume most of his normal duties, though Eliza still insisted he avoid the heaviest work. Their relationship continued to deepen, settling into a comfortable rhythm that felt both exciting and reassuringly stable. Rose, now crawling with determined speed and pulling herself up on furniture, had become completely devoted to Samuel, greeting him with squeals of delight whenever he entered a room. One particularly scorching afternoon, Samuel surprised Eliza by appearing at the kitchen door well before his usual dinner time. "Get Rose and pack a small basket," he instructed, a mysterious smile playing at his lips. "I want to show you both something." Intrigued, Eliza complied, gathering a light meal and fresh water while Samuel disappeared to the stable. When she emerged onto the porch with Rose on her hip, she found him waiting with a wagon and team, a large object in the back concealed beneath a tarp. "What are you planning?" she asked, handing Rose to him while she climbed up onto the seat. "You'll see," Samuel replied, settling Rose comfortably between them before taking up the reins. They traveled for nearly half an hour, following a winding path that led away from the main ranch buildings and up into the foothills. The air grew slightly cooler as they gained elevation, bringing welcome relief from the valley heat. Finally, Samuel drew the horses to a halt in a small clearing sheltered by pines, with a breathtaking view of the ranch spread out below them. "It's beautiful," Eliza exclaimed, taking in the panorama of green pastures, silver ribbons of creeks, and the distant mountains hazy in the summer heat. My father used to bring me up here when I was a boy, Samuel explained, helping her down from the wagon. Said a man should always take time to look at what he's building, to remember why the work matters. He spread a blanket in the shade of a large pine and set Rose upon it. The baby immediately began investigating pine needles and small stones with intense concentration, allowing the adults a moment to simply enjoy the view. I can see why he chose this spot, Eliza said, standing close enough to Samuel that their shoulders touched. You can see the whole valley from here. Not just the ranch, Samuel pointed out, guiding her gaze with his hand. See there, that's Fort Benton in the distance. And beyond that, if the day were clearer, you'd see the first rises of the Rockies. Eliza leaned slightly against him, content in the moment. Thank you for bringing us here. That's not the only reason we came, Samuel replied, moving back to the wagon. I have something to show you. He pulled the tarp away to reveal what appeared to be a small wooden cradle, beautifully crafted from polished oak. Eliza gasped, moving closer to examine it. Samuel, it's exquisite, she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Did you make this? He nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. Been working on it in the evenings when you thought I was going over accounts in my study. Had to wait for my shoulder to heal enough to finish the details. He glanced at Rose, who was contentedly gumming a piece of bread Eliza had brought. She'll be outgrowing her crib soon. Thought she might like something special made just for her. Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. The care evident in every polished surface, every perfectly fitted joint, spoke more eloquently than words of Samuel's feelings for her daughter. She'll love it, Eliza said softly, as will any brothers or sisters who might come after her. Samuel's eyes, already warm with affection, kindled with something deeper at her words. Brothers and sisters, he repeated, his voice slightly rough. I'd like that, Eliza, very much. So would I, she admitted, holding his gaze. Samuel took both her hands in his expression growing serious. I had a whole speech planned, he said, a slight smile tugging at his lips. Was going to wait until sunset, make it proper and romantic. Eliza's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. Samuel, but seeing you here in this place that means so much to me, with Rose happy and safe. He shook his head slightly. I don't want to wait any more. Releasing her hands, Samuel lowered himself to one knee on the blanket beside them. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a modest but beautifully clear diamond. Eliza Davis, he said, his voice steady and sure, from the moment you walked into my life, you've brought warmth and purpose and joy I never knew I was missing. I love you more than I thought possible, and I love Rose as if she were my own. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, of making the Diamond D your permanent home, of allowing me to be a father to Rose and whatever other children we might be blessed with? Eliza felt tears spill onto her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. Yes, she whispered, then more strongly, yes, Samuel, with all my heart, yes. His face broke into a smile of such pure happiness that it nearly took her breath away. Rising to his feet, he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. They were interrupted by an indignant squawk from Rose, who had apparently decided she was being ignored for too long. Laughing, Samuel scooped the baby up into his arms, lifting her high above his head to her delighted squeals. What do you think, Rose? He asked, bringing her down to eye level. Will you have me for a father? In response, Rose patted his cheeks with both hands, babbling happily, which they both took as enthusiastic approval. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long golden light across the valley below, the three of them shared the simple meal Eliza had packed. It was, Eliza thought, watching Samuel point out landmarks to Rose, who clearly understood nothing but was entranced by his voice, a perfect beginning to their life as a family. Later, as they drove back down to the ranch house, Rose sleeping soundly in Eliza's lap, Samuel said quietly, "There's one more thing we should discuss." "What's that?" Eliza asked, still floating on the happiness of the afternoon. "Your name," Samuel replied. "When we marry, you'll be Eliza Donovan." He glanced at Rose. "And I was thinking, if you agree, I'd like to legally adopt Rose, make her a Donovan too." Eliza's heart swelled with love for this man who continuously showed his devotion in both words and actions. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "Rose Davis Donovan, it has a nice ring to it." "It does," Samuel agreed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "And perhaps in time we'll add a few more Donovans to the family." "I'd like that very much," Eliza replied, leaning her head against his shoulder as the wagon rolled homeward through the golden evening light. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and the surrounding community. Hank, who had watched their relationship develop with quiet approval, was the first to offer congratulations, followed by the ranch hands who seemed genuinely pleased that their boss had found happiness. In town, reactions were more mixed. Some, like Dr. Weber, were openly delighted. Others, particularly those who had turned Eliza away on her first night in Fort Benton, were suddenly eager to claim friendship with the future Mrs. Donovan, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory. Eliza met such overtures with polite grace, but privately confided to Samuel that she had no intention of forgetting who had shown true kindness when it mattered. They set the wedding date for early October, after the cattle drive, and before winter set in. It would be a simple ceremony at the ranch, with only close friends in attendance, exactly what both of them wanted. As the weeks passed and summer began to yield to fall, Eliza found herself busier than ever, balancing her regular duties with wedding preparations and caring for an increasingly active Rose. Samuel, preoccupied with the final arrangements for the cattle drive, was often away during the day but made a point of spending every evening with his new family, reading to Rose before her bedtime, and then sitting with Eliza on the porch, planning their future together. One evening in late September, just days before Samuel was to leave with the cattle drive, they sat in their usual spot watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Rose had been put to bed, the house was quiet, and a pleasant coolness had replaced the day's warmth. "I've been thinking," Samuel said, his arm around Eliza's shoulders. "When I get back from the drive before the wedding, there's something I'd like to do for Rose." Eliza looked up at him curiously. "What's that?" "I'd like to build her a proper playroom," he explained. "There's that small room off the sitting room that we're not really using. I thought I could put in some shelves for toys, maybe a small table and chairs for when she's a bit older." He hesitated, watching Eliza's face. "What do you think?" Eliza felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. Every time she thought she couldn't possibly love this man more, he found some new way to prove her wrong. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said. "Rose would love it, and so would I." Samuel smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Good. I'll start planning it while I'm on the trail." His expression grew more serious. "I don't like leaving you both, even for a few weeks." "We'll be fine," Eliza assured him, though she would miss him terribly. "Hank will be here and the hands who aren't going on the drive. Besides, it's a good opportunity for me to finish my wedding dress without you trying to sneak a peek at it." Samuel chuckled. "Can't blame a man for being curious." His hand found hers, his thumb brushing over the engagement ring he had placed there. "When I get back, you'll be my wife." "And you'll be my husband," Eliza replied softly, "and Rose's father in every way that matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky. Finally, Samuel spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" he asked. "If I hadn't gone to Hawkins' store that particular night, if you had arrived in Fort Benton a day earlier or later." "I try not to think about it," Eliza admitted. "It frightens me how easily we might have missed each other." She turned in his arms to face him. "But we didn't. Whatever forces guide our lives, fate, providence, simple luck, they brought us together when we both needed it most." Samuel nodded, his eyes reflecting the last light of the fading day. "I've never been one for believing in destiny," he said. "Always figured a man makes his own way in life through hard work and determination." His hand came up to cup her cheek gently. "But meeting you and Rose the way it happened, sometimes it feels like more than chance." "I know what you mean," Eliza said, leaning into his touch. "When Thomas died, I thought my future died with him. I came west not hoping for happiness, just survival. Finding you, finding this place that feels so much like home." She shook her head slightly, struggling to express what was in her heart. "It feels like a gift I never expected, never even dared to hope for." "A gift for us both," Samuel agreed, drawing her closer. "One I intend to treasure every day of our lives together." As his lips met hers in a kiss that spoke of devotion and promise, Eliza thought of how far they had come from that first night, her exhausted and desperate, him extending a simple kindness that had changed everything. Her baby had slept beneath torn blankets, and the cowboy had said, "You'll sleep under mine." Now they were building a life together, a family bound not by blood, but by something perhaps even stronger: choice, commitment, and a love that had grown from the smallest seed of compassion into something beautiful and enduring. In the days leading up to Samuel's departure with the cattle drive, Eliza noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. Though he remained attentive and loving, there was a new restlessness about him, a tendency to fall into distracted silence when he thought she wasn't watching. At first, she attributed it to his concerns about the drive, which represented a significant portion of the ranch's annual income. But as the pattern continued, she began to wonder if there was something more. The night before he was to leave, after Rose had been tucked into her crib with the wooden horse Samuel had carved for her clutched in her small hand, Eliza found him in his study, standing before the window with a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. "Samuel," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Is everything all right?" He turned, offering her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just thinking." Eliza crossed the room to stand beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "About the drive." Samuel hesitated, then set his glass aside with a sigh. "Partly," he admitted, "but there's something else I've been meaning to discuss with you, and I keep finding reasons to put it off." A flicker of anxiety passed through Eliza. "That sounds serious." "It is, in a way." Samuel took both her hands in his expression earnest. "Eliza, before I leave tomorrow, there's something about my past that you should know, something I should have told you earlier, but—" He shook his head slightly. "I was afraid it might change how you see me." Eliza's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "Samuel, whatever it is, it won't change my feelings for you." He searched her face, then nodded, seeming to gather his resolve. "When I was younger, before my mother died, I was different, wilder. I had a reputation in these parts as someone with a quick temper and quicker fists." He looked down at their joined hands. "There was a man in Fort Benton, James Blackwell. He owned the saloon back then." He was cruel to his workers, especially the women, but no one stood up to him because he had money and influence. Eliza listened quietly, knowing instinctively that Samuel needed to tell this story in his own way, without interruption. One night I was in town and saw him beating one of the saloon girls in the alley behind his establishment. I intervened. There was a fight. Samuel's jaw tightened at the memory. I beat him badly, Eliza. Worse than I meant to. He lived, but he was never the same afterward. You were defending someone weaker, Eliza said softly. There's no shame in that. Samuel shook his head. The shame isn't in defending her. It's in how far I went, how completely I lost control. He met her gaze directly. Blackwell left town after that, but not before spreading rumors that I was dangerous, unstable. Some people still believe it, even after all these years of me proving otherwise. Is that why some folks in town seemed distant when we visited? Eliza asked, remembering the cool reception they had received from certain merchants. Partly, Samuel confirmed, and partly because I've kept to myself since Mother died, focused on the ranch rather than socializing. He squeezed her hands gently. I wanted you to know this before we marry, before you take my name. There might be whispers, old stories brought up again when our wedding is announced. Eliza considered his words carefully. Thank you for telling me, she said at last. But Samuel, we all have parts of our past that we're not proud of. The man who defended that saloon girl is the same man who offered shelter to a desperate woman and her baby. The same man who has shown nothing but kindness, gentleness, and integrity since I've known him. Relief washed over Samuel's features. So this doesn't change anything for you. The only thing it changes, Eliza replied, moving closer to him, is that I love you even more for your honesty and for having the courage to stand up for someone who needed protection, even at cost to yourself. Samuel drew her into his arms, holding her as if she were something infinitely precious. I don't deserve you, he murmured into her hair. Yes, you do, Eliza countered, lifting her face to his. We deserve each other and the happiness we've found together. When he kissed her, it was with a new depth of feeling, as if the unburdening of his secret had removed a final barrier between them. Eliza responded in kind, pouring all her love and acceptance into the embrace. Later, as they stood on the porch saying a private goodnight before retiring to their separate rooms, a propriety they had maintained despite their engagement, Samuel took her hand, pressing the key to his study into her palm. While I'm gone, he said, feel free to use my study if you'd like some quiet time to read or write. There's something in the bottom drawer of the desk that I want you to have. Curious, Eliza asked. What is it? Samuel smiled mysteriously. Something that belongs to you now. You'll understand when you see it. With that cryptic statement and a final kiss, they parted for the night, both aware that the next time they would be alone together would be after his return, just days before their wedding. The following morning was a flurry of activity as the cattle drive prepared to depart. Eliza rose before dawn to cook a hearty breakfast for Samuel and the hands who would be accompanying him. Rose, sensing the excitement, was unusually fussy, clinging to Samuel when he came to say goodbye as if understanding he would be gone for some time. Don't worry, little one, he soothed, holding her close. I'll be back before you know it. You take care of your mama while I'm gone, all right? Rose's response was to grasp his shirt more tightly, her lower lip trembling. Samuel looked to Eliza helplessly, clearly torn between his duty to the ranch and his reluctance to upset his soon-to-be daughter. It's all right, Eliza assured him, gently extracting Rose from his arms. She'll be fine once you're gone. Children are resilient, Samuel nodded, though he still looked troubled. Take care of each other, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'll send word when we reach Helena. "Be safe," Eliza replied, fighting back tears of her own. "We'll be waiting for you." With a final kiss for each of them, Samuel strode out to where Hank and the others were waiting with the herd. Eliza stood on the porch, Rose in her arms, watching as the procession of men, horses, and cattle began moving slowly northward, Samuel's tall figure easily recognizable at the lead. "Wave goodbye to Papa," Eliza told Rose, lifting the baby's small hand in a farewell gesture. The word Papa felt right on her tongue, natural and true, despite the lack of biological connection. In every way that mattered, Samuel was Rose's father now. As the dust from the cattle drive faded into the distance, Eliza turned back to their house now. She reminded herself. The next few weeks would be busy with wedding preparations and her normal duties, but she already felt Samuel's absence like a physical ache. That evening, after Rose was asleep, Eliza remembered the key Samuel had given her. Curiosity drew her to his study, a room she had entered often but always with him present. It felt strangely intimate to be there alone, surrounded by his personal belongings, books well worn from reading, maps of the ranch lands marked with his notations, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco lingering in the air. She crossed to the large oak desk, and after a moment's hesitation, unlocked the bottom drawer as Samuel had instructed. Inside, she found a leather-bound document resting atop a folded piece of paper. Opening the document, Eliza gasped as she realized what she was holding: the deed to the Diamond D Ranch, newly drawn up to include her name alongside Samuel's as joint owner. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the accompanying note, written in Samuel's strong, clear hand. "My dearest Eliza, by the time you read this, I will be on the trail to Helena with the herd. I wanted you to know that the Diamond D is as much yours now as it is mine. This land has been in my family for 20 years, but a ranch is more than land, and cattle, it's a home and a future. You and Rose are my future, and everything I have is yours. I know we agreed to wait until after the wedding to make things official, but I couldn't leave without knowing you were provided for, no matter what might happen. The deed is legally binding. Lawyer Thompson in Fort Benton helped me draw it up last week. Take care of our home until I return. I count the days until I can call you my wife. With all my love." Samuel. Tears blurred Eliza's vision as she read and reread the note. The magnitude of Samuel's trust in her, his commitment to making her truly an equal partner in all aspects of their life together, was overwhelming. Many men in his position would have maintained sole ownership of such valuable property, regardless of marital status. But Samuel, as always, had chosen the path of generosity and complete trust. Carefully returning the deed to the drawer and locking it for safekeeping, Eliza carried his note with her as she made her nightly rounds of the house, checking doors and windows before retiring. In the nursery, she paused to look down at Rose, sleeping peacefully in the crib that would soon be replaced by the beautiful cradle Samuel had crafted. "We're very lucky, little one," she whispered. "Very lucky indeed." In the days that followed, Eliza threw herself into preparations for the wedding and keeping the household running smoothly in Samuel's absence. She finished her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk with lace trim that she had been working on in secret. She baked and preserved, wanting to ensure the house was well stocked for winter, and spent time in the garden harvesting the last of the summer vegetables. Rose, who had recently taken her first tentative steps, kept Eliza busy with her newfound mobility. The little girl seemed to grow more confident and curious by the day, exploring every corner of the house with determined concentration. She still carried the wooden horse Samuel had made everywhere she went, and often looked toward the door expectantly, as if waiting for his return. A week after Samuel's departure, a rider arrived from the cattle drive with a brief message. They had reached Helena safely, sold the cattle at a good price, and expected to begin the journey home within days. Eliza read the note with relief and growing excitement. Soon Samuel would be home, and they would be married at last. As the expected date of his return approached, Eliza became increasingly restless. She cleaned the already immaculate house from top to bottom, prepared Samuel's favorite meals to welcome him home, and spent hours sitting on the porch with Rose, watching the road for any sign of riders. Finally, on a crisp afternoon in early October, with the aspen trees glowing gold against the blue Montana sky, Eliza spotted a cloud of dust in the distance. She stood, heart racing, as the shapes of riders gradually became distinguishable. "Look, Rose," she said, pointing. "Papa's coming home." Rose, who had been playing with wooden blocks on the porch, looked up with interest. "Papa," she said clearly, the word new to her vocabulary but perfectly recognizable. Eliza gasped, scooping her daughter up in delight. "Yes, Papa, can you say it again?" "Papa," Rose repeated, looking pleased with herself. "Oh, what a clever girl you are," Eliza praised, kissing her daughter's cheek. "What a wonderful surprise for Papa." They watched together as the riders drew closer, Eliza's heart swelling with anticipation. Samuel rode at the front, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. As he neared the house, he spurred his horse ahead of the others, covering the remaining distance at a gallop. He barely waited for his horse to stop before swinging down from the saddle and taking the porch steps 2 at a time. Eliza moved to meet him, Rose in her arms, her face alight with joy. "Welcome home," she began, but got no further as Samuel gathered both of them into his embrace, his kiss stealing her breath and her words. "I missed you both so much," he said when they finally broke apart, his voice husky with emotion. He looked down at Rose, who was studying him intently. "Hello, little one, have you been good for your mama?" Rose reached for him without hesitation. "Papa," she said clearly, smiling proudly at her new word. Samuel froze, his eyes widening in astonishment before filling with tears. "Did she just—" "She started saying it today," Eliza confirmed, her own eyes damp with happy tears. "Just in time for your homecoming." Samuel took Rose from Eliza's arms, lifting the baby high above his head to her squealing delight before bringing her down to press a kiss to her forehead. "That's right, Rose," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your papa, and I always will be." Over Samuel's shoulder, Eliza saw Hank and the other riders approaching, their faces tired but satisfied after the successful drive. She touched Samuel's arm gently. "Your men are coming. They'll be hungry and thirsty after the long ride." Samuel nodded, reluctantly setting Rose down to toddle back to her blocks. "We did well in Helena," he told Eliza as they watched the approaching riders. "Better than expected. The money will see us through the winter comfortably and leave enough to make some improvements to the ranch next spring." The way he said us, and we, so naturally including Eliza in the ranch's fortunes, warmed her heart. "I'm glad," she said simply. "Was the journey difficult?" "No more than usual," Samuel replied, though something in his tone made Eliza look at him more closely. There was a tension in his shoulders, a guardedness in his eyes that hadn't been there before he left. Before she could question him further, the other men reached the house, and the moment for private conversation passed. The next hours were filled with activity serving food and drink to the returning drovers, listening to tales of the journey, and celebrating the successful sale of the cattle. It wasn't until late evening, after Rose had been put to bed, and the ranch hands had retired to their bunkhouse, that Eliza and Samuel found themselves alone on the porch, much as they had been the night before his departure. "You found the deed," Samuel said, not quite a question. Eliza nodded. "It was an incredible gesture, Samuel. I don't know how to thank you." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her engagement ring. "No thanks needed. What's mine is yours now. That's what marriage means to me, a true partnership." Eliza studied his profile in the moonlight, noting again the subtle tension in his jaw. "Something happened in Helena," she said quietly. "Something you're not telling me." Samuel's slight start confirmed her suspicion. He was silent for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "You've become too good at reading me," he observed wryly. "Comes with loving someone," Eliza replied, keeping her tone light though concern was growing within her. "What is it, Samuel? Whatever it is, we'll face it together." He turned to her, his expression grave. "I saw James Blackwell in Helena. He's returned to the territory." Eliza felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "The man you fought with years ago, did he speak to you?" "No," Samuel said, shaking his head. "He saw me across the street and deliberately turned away. But later I overheard him talking to some men at the hotel. He was asking questions about me, about the ranch." His hand tightened around hers. "And about you." "Me?" Eliza's surprise was genuine. "But how would he even know about me? News travels," Samuel replied grimly. "Our engagement hasn't exactly been a secret, and Blackwell always did have a talent for finding out things that might be useful to him." Eliza considered this information carefully. "What do you think he wants?" "Revenge, most likely," Samuel said, his voice hard. "I humiliated him, drove him from a profitable business. Men like Blackwell don't forget such things." "But it was years ago," Eliza pointed out. "Surely he's moved on with his life." Samuel's expression remained troubled. "I hope so, but I want you to be careful while he's in the area. Don't go into town alone and keep Rose close to you at all times." "You're frightening me," Eliza said honestly. Samuel immediately pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to alarm you, but I want you to be aware." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I won't let anything happen to either of you. You have my word on that." Eliza nodded against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Our wedding is in 3 days," she reminded him, deliberately changing the subject to something joyful. "Whatever Blackwell might want, he can't take that from us." Samuel's posture relaxed slightly at her words. "You're right," he agreed, his voice warming. "In 3 days you'll be my wife. Nothing else matters beside that." As they sat together in the moonlight, Eliza tried to push thoughts of James Blackwell from her mind. She refused to allow some shadow from the past to darken what should be the happiest time of her life. Samuel was home. They would be married in just days, and their future together was bright with promise. Yet as they finally rose to go inside, she couldn't quite shake the feeling that their newfound happiness was being watched by unfriendly eyes, and that the peace they had built together might soon be tested in ways neither of them could anticipate. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with just a hint of autumn crispness in the air. Eliza woke early, a flutter of excitement in her stomach as she realized that by nightfall she would be Samuel's wife in truth. Rose was unusually cooperative that morning, as if sensing the importance of the day. She sat quietly in her high chair, happily mashing pieces of soft bread between her fingers while Eliza prepared herself for the ceremony. The wedding was to be held at midday in the large sitting room of the ranch house, which had been decorated with wildflowers and autumn foliage gathered by the ranch hands' wives. Dr. Weber had agreed to stand as a witness for Samuel, while Mrs. Peterson, the midwife who had befriended Eliza during her time in Fort Benton, would stand for her. As the hour approached, Eliza dressed carefully in her ivory silk gown, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style adorned with small white flowers. Rose would wear a new dress of pale blue that Eliza had sewn to match her eyes, Samuel's eyes. Many had remarked, though it was merely a happy coincidence. A knock at her bedroom door startled Eliza from her preparations. "Yes," she called, expecting Mrs. Peterson, who had promised to help with the final touches to her appearance. Instead, Samuel's voice came through the door. "Eliza, may I speak with you for a moment?" Eliza hesitated, mindful of the tradition that the groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," Samuel assured her quickly. There's something I want to give you before the ceremony. I won't look if you're already dressed." Curious, Eliza opened the door a crack, keeping herself hidden behind it. Samuel stood in the hallway, looking handsome in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. In his hands, he held a small wooden box. "You look beautiful," he said, catching a glimpse of her gown through the narrow opening. Eliza smiled, though she kept the door mostly closed. "You're not supposed to see me yet." "I'm not looking," Samuel promised, though his eyes sparkled with appreciation for what little he could see. He held out the box. "This is for you. I wanted you to have it before the ceremony." Eliza accepted the box, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "Open it and see," Samuel encouraged, a note of anticipation in his voice. Eliza closed the door slightly more to use both hands, lifting the lid of the box to reveal a delicate gold locket nestled on a bed of velvet. It was oval in shape, with an intricate floral pattern engraved on its surface. "Oh, Samuel," she breathed, lifting it carefully from the box. "It's beautiful." "Open it," he instructed softly. Eliza did as he asked, finding two tiny portraits inside, one of Rose, smiling her toothless baby smile, and one of Samuel, his expression serious yet warm. "When did you?" "I had them done in Helena," Samuel explained. "There was a photographer there, I thought." "Well, I thought you might like to keep us close to your heart." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I love it," she said sincerely. "Will you help me put it on?" She opened the door wider, turning so that Samuel could fasten the locket around her neck. His fingers were gentle as they brushed against her skin, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. "Perfect," he said when the clasp was secured. "Just like you." Eliza turned back to face him, touching the locket where it rested against her collarbone. "Thank you. It's the most wonderful gift." Samuel's eyes were soft with emotion as he looked at her. "In a few hours, I'll give you my name and my promise to love you for the rest of our lives. But I wanted you to have this first, something that's just from my heart to yours." Impulsively, Eliza stood on tiptoe to press a swift kiss to his lips. "I can't wait to be your wife," she whispered. "And I can't wait to be your husband," Samuel replied, reluctantly stepping back. "I should go before Mrs. Peterson catches me breaking tradition and scolds me severely." Eliza laughed, already feeling lighter and happier than she could remember being in years. "I'll see you downstairs." "I'll be the one waiting impatiently at the makeshift altar," Samuel promised with a wink before heading back down the hallway. Eliza closed the door, her fingers still tracing the outline of the locket. It was such a perfect gift, thoughtful, personal, and symbolic of the family they were creating together. Rose, watching from her spot on the bed, babbled excitedly, as if sensing her mother's happiness. "Yes, sweetheart," Eliza said, crossing to pick up her daughter. "Today we become a real family. Today we start our new life with Papa." The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. Judge Wilson from Fort Benton performed the service, his words resonating through the sitting room where friends and ranch employees had gathered to witness the union. Rose, held by Mrs. Peterson, watched with solemn curiosity as her mother and Samuel exchanged vows and rings. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, the small assembly broke into enthusiastic applause, none more delighted than Hank, who had grown genuinely fond of Eliza and Rose during the months they had been at the ranch. The celebration afterward was joyful but modest, a feast prepared by the ranch hands' wives. Music provided by one of the cowboys who played the fiddle with surprising skill, and plenty of good whiskey for toasts to the happy couple. As the afternoon wore on, Eliza found herself watching Samuel with Rose, who had been passed from guest to guest, but always returned to her new father's arms with obvious preference. There was something about seeing them together, Samuel's large, capable hands supporting Rose's small form, her tiny fingers patting his cheeks with complete trust, that filled Eliza's heart almost to bursting. "You look happy, Mrs. Donovan, Doctor," Weber observed, coming to stand beside her as she watched her new family. "I am," Eliza confirmed, the new name still strange but welcome on her ears. "Happier than I ever thought possible after losing Thomas." The doctor nodded understandingly. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Just when we think our story is over, we turn the page and find a new chapter beginning." "That's exactly it," Eliza agreed, her gaze still on Samuel and Rose. "A new chapter, a new beginning." As if sensing her attention, Samuel looked up and caught her eye across the room. The love in his expression was so clear, so unguarded, that Eliza felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. He said something to Rose, who turned and spotted her mother, immediately reaching out with eager hands. "I believe your family requires your presence, Mrs. Donovan, Doctor," Weber said with a smile, gently urging her forward. Eliza moved through the crowd to join Samuel and Rose, feeling a sense of completion as Samuel's arm circled her waist, drawing her against his side. Rose, now happily situated between them, babbled contentedly, secure in the love that surrounded her. "Happy?" Samuel asked softly, his lips close to her ear. "Completely," Eliza assured him, tilting her face up for a kiss that drew good-natured cheers from their guests. As the celebration continued around them, Eliza felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led them to this moment. From that first night in Fort Benton, when her baby slept beneath torn blankets and the cowboy had offered his own, to this day when they had pledged their lives to each other, it was a path neither of them could have foreseen, yet one that felt somehow inevitable, as if their hearts had been seeking each other all along. Later, after the guests had departed and Rose had been settled for the night in her new cradle, Eliza and Samuel stood together in what was now their bedroom, the room he had occupied alone for so many years, now transformed by her presence, her brush on the dressing table, her shawl draped over a chair, the scent of her rose water lingering in the air. "Welcome home, Mrs. Donovan," Samuel said softly, drawing her into his arms with a tenderness that spoke of the deep respect underlying their passion. "I've been home since the moment you found us," Eliza replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You are my home, Samuel. You and Rose, and this life we're building together." As the first stars appeared in the Montana sky outside their window, Samuel and Eliza began their married life with a love that had grown from compassion to friendship to something deep, and enduring, a love strong enough to withstand whatever challenges the future might hold, a love that had transformed two separate journeys into one shared path forward. And somewhere in the nursery down the hall, Rose slept peacefully in the cradle her father had crafted with his own hands, no longer wrapped in torn blankets, but surrounded by the warmth and security of a family bound together not by blood, but by something even more powerful: choice, commitment, and a love that had found its way home at last. Winter came early to Montana that year, the first snow falling just 3 weeks after Samuel and Eliza's wedding. By December, the ranch was blanketed in white, the cattle huddled in sheltered pastures, and the Diamond D ranch house glowed with warmth and light against the frozen landscape. For Eliza, those first months of marriage were a time of profound happiness. The transition from housekeeper to wife had been seamless in many ways. She still managed the household and cared for Rose, but now she did so as Samuel's partner in every sense. They made decisions together about the ranch, sharing both responsibilities and pleasures with an ease that made it seem as though they had been married for years rather than months. Rose thrived under their joint care, growing more talkative and adventurous by the day. She had fully embraced Samuel as her father, running to greet him whenever he returned from working outside with cries of "Papa!" that never failed to bring a smile to his face. For his part, Samuel doted on the little girl, spending hours teaching her to build snowmen in the yard or reading to her before the fire on cold evenings. The shadow cast by James Blackwell's return to the territory had faded somewhat with time and distance. There had been no sign of him near Fort Benton or the ranch, and Samuel had gradually relaxed his vigilance, though he still preferred that Eliza not travel to town alone. Christmas approached with a festivity that the ranch house hadn't seen in many years. Samuel confessed to Eliza that he had barely acknowledged the holiday since his mother's death, but Rose's excitement about the colorful decorations and Samuel's desire to create new family traditions had rekindled his enjoyment of the season. Together, they cut a small pine from their land and set it up in the sitting room, decorating it with paper ornaments Eliza had made and strings of dried berries and popcorn. Samuel carved a set of wooden animals for Rose, a nativity scene that the little girl arranged and rearranged constantly, though the sheep and cows often ended up in the manger while Mary and Joseph watched from the outskirts. On Christmas Eve, as a gentle snow fell outside, the three of them sat before the fire in the sitting room, Rose already in her nightgown, fighting sleep as she played with her new toys. "I have something for you," Samuel said to Eliza, reaching beneath his chair to produce a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. "But we agreed to exchange gifts tomorrow," Eliza protested, though her eyes lit up with pleasure. Samuel smiled, passing her the package. This one couldn't wait. Curious, Eliza untied the ribbon and carefully removed the paper to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover soft and supple beneath her fingers. Opening it, she found the pages blank, waiting to be filled. "I remember you mentioning that you used to keep a journal before Rose was born," Samuel explained. "Thought you might like to start again. Record our life together, Rose's growing up, the good days and the hard ones." Eliza ran her fingers over the smooth pages, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Thank you." "Look at the inside cover," Samuel suggested. Eliza turned back to the front of the journal, finding an inscription in Samuel's strong handwriting. "To my beloved wife. Eliza, may these pages hold the story of our family, a tale of love that began with a simple blanket and grows more beautiful with each passing day." "With all my heart," Samuel, tears pricked at Eliza's eyes as she read the words. "Oh, Samuel," she whispered, looking up to find him watching her with tender eyes. "I love it, and I love you." "I love you too," he replied, leaning over to kiss her softly. "More than I ever thought possible." Their moment was interrupted by a small snore from the hearth rug, where Rose had finally lost her battle with sleep, curled up beside her wooden animals. They shared a smile at the sight of their daughter, her cheeks flushed with warmth, her small hand still clutching the carved horse that had been her first gift from Samuel. "I should put her to bed," Eliza said, reluctantly setting aside her new journal. "Let me," Samuel offered, already moving to lift Rose gently into his arms. The little girl stirred slightly but didn't wake, instinctively nestling against his broad chest. Eliza watched as he carried Rose upstairs, his movements careful and tender. Their life together wasn't perfect. There were still challenges in running the ranch, occasional disagreements as they learned to navigate marriage, moments of doubt or fear about the future. But in the essentials, in the deep and abiding love they shared for each other and for Rose, they had found a happiness that neither had dared to hope for before fate had brought them together. Later that night, as they lay in their bed with the sound of the winter wind outside their window, Samuel drew Eliza close against his side. "Are you happy, Eliza?" he asked, his voice quiet in the darkness. "Truly happy?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, resting her head on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "I have everything I could ever want right here, you, Rose, our home." Samuel's arms tightened around her. "When I saw you that first night in Fort Benton, you looked so tired, so desperate, yet so determined. All I wanted was to help you get through one night safely." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I never imagined you'd end up changing my entire life." "You changed mine first," Eliza reminded him. "I came west with nothing but hope and determination. You gave us so much more safety, belonging, love." They fell silent, content in each other's arms as the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in pristine white. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, their first as a family. There would be gifts and feasting and laughter. But the greatest gift, they both knew, had already been given: the gift of finding each other, of building a family and a future from what had begun as a simple act of kindness on a cold Montana night. As sleep began to claim her, Eliza thought of the journal Samuel had given her, of all the moments and memories they would create together in the years ahead. Their story, which had begun with her baby sleeping beneath torn blankets and a cowboy offering his own, was still being written, page by page, day by day. And it was, she knew with absolute certainty as she drifted into dreams within the circle of her husband's arms, the most beautiful story she could ever have imagined.